Hey, John Marion here. I want to add this latest video about my Afghanistan story. I'm running between appointments. I'm in the business world and I'm in real estate, and that's what I do full time. But meanwhile, I do want to put out as much content as quickly as I can about my Afghanistan story. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the problem of the Taliban and the solution. And I'm going to tell you a story of how I made a prediction in October of 2001 that has come true this week, and why I was able to make that prediction. And I'm going to explain this to you by telling you my story that after 9/11 2001, I was contacted by several government agencies, including the military, and I was asked to come to Fort Bragg to meet up with the Special Forces PSYOPs. And this was when the invasion of Afghanistan was being planned out. And so I was a known entity at 9/11 because of my involvement with Afghanistan and some of the things that I was doing publicly at that point. I was pretty easy to find. And so I took up the invite and was able to travel into Fort Bragg when it was locked down. I was traveling with an Iranian friend or a colleague who was also called to go there. And we went, and because I don't have a security clearance, I couldn't get into the main building, but the guys that I needed to meet up with came outside, and we met in basically a mobile home, a trailer that was kind of in the woods. There was like a network of trailers set up in the woods. So we went in there. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us in the room, and I found out what was going on with the planning for the invasion of Afghanistan and what this particular PSYOPs operation was. And it was very simple and common sense kind of thing to do if you're in that world. They wanted to print up flyers to throw out of the helicopters, I believe. We'll have to go back in history, and if you're familiar with what actually went down, you'll understand what I'm saying. And then also they needed sound bites to shout out, or with loudspeakers, hover over villages and areas of Afghanistan, warning of an American invasion and how to behave and act and just to be safe and whatnot. So they were looking for a linguist, a Dari linguist, that could advise them on some of the linguistics, on what to write and what to say, and culturally, and to get it right. And it quickly became apparent in that meeting that they really needed a native speaker, a native Afghan, and there were 2 of them in the room, believe it or not. And I was surprised that Afghans were embedded in special forces. One enlisted and one civilian, and then there was also an American civilian and an American soldier, and then me and the Iranian guy. And so we were hanging out talking about this, and it became evident that there was miscommunication. As much as my skills and knowledge about Afghanistan could be helpful in certain circumstances, I was not the right guy to really deliver what they needed. And so we kind of had some small talk and just talked about the efficiencies or non-efficiencies of government trying to find people to meet resources. But they did a good job, and in the end, and they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. So I was cued in on what was going to go down a couple of weeks before the actual American invasion of Afghanistan, and I just kind of waited, and then it hit the news. And when I remember that day when the invasion took place, and when I consumed that news content about that, it dawned on me, and that this was not going to be a good long-term solution to the problem of the Taliban, or the problem of terrorism in Afghanistan. And it took me a few weeks after the invasion to really gather my thoughts and get clarity on this, when I met up with a small group of just private individuals that I knew, and I had a couple of maps from Afghanistan that I rolled out, and I remember rolling them out on the floor, very big, large maps, and I was giving just a small lecture on the geography and the people groups and the ethnicities of the people of Afghanistan and where Pashtunistan is, and just different things. And I made a prediction. I said, the Pashtun will get their revenge. And what I meant by that, I'm going to explain a little more in detail about that, but what I meant by that is that no matter what the American government and military does in Afghanistan, the Pashtun will wait for the opportunity and work towards getting revenge for anyone that invades their space. And they have a history and culture of doing this. And so why would I say that? Why would I say the Pashtun would get their revenge? Well, I have a lot of friends that are much more knowledgeable in a deeper level about Pashtun culture, but I want to just mention two qualities about Pashtun culture that's relevant to the point I'm trying to make. So the concept of honor is extremely important in, I would say, Eastern cultures in general, much more than in the West and in America in particular. But the concept of honor and shame is extremely important. It's paramount in these societies and how people relate to one another. And so the worst thing that you can do is bring shame on somebody or dishonor them. And certainly the Taliban and the Pashtun people group, that is definitely true. There's another layer of this that ingrained in Pashtun culture is this concept of revenge. Revenge is an important cultural quality or cultural value, I should say, among the Pashtun people. And so when their honor is attacked and when they are shamed, they don't have, psychologically, they don't have a way to deal with that other than to exact revenge. That is the way to restore your honor. And so this is, we're talking about it in the context of the Taliban and Pashtunistan, but really this is a human problem. It's a problem of the heart. We as human beings, it's so easy for us to get bitterness in our heart, hatred in our heart, and want to exact revenge. And you could argue, and at the end of this video I'll ask you guys a question, is revenge a good thing? And I would say no, when it really creates in your heart something that tears you up and makes you hate other people. That's not a good quality. And I think ultimately that is the problem with the Taliban, that the concept of revenge is so ingrained and so important to them that there's never end. There's a never end to revenge being satisfied, because if the exterior enemies are gone, then there's human conflict, even within your own family, within other tribes, neighbors. There's always going to be people that will that you feel are dishonoring you, and therefore you have to and you will exact revenge. So it's not merely because of external attacks on Pashtunistan by America, Soviets, British, whatever. It's not because of that ultimately. It's ultimately a condition of the human heart. And so this is where I'm going with this. Now, I will say about the Special Forces, and I'm going to mention the Marines in a few minutes. I don't really want to make this a military kind of video series. It's not about the U.S. military. It's not about foreign policy. But the U.S. Special Forces are trained to really make an impact culturally on the places that they go. But ultimately, when you're dealing with conditions of the human heart like revenge and hatred, there's not a military solution to that. There's not a government policy solution to that problem. Now, we as human beings, whichever station of life we're in, whether we work for the government, whether we're in the military, in the private sector, whatever we do, we can make a tremendous impact on people's lives. And I think you guys that worked in the special forces, that served in Afghanistan and may even be there now, your work is valuable. You have impacted people's lives. You have changed hearts and minds, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But the human problem that I'm talking about requires a solution that cannot come from government. This is ultimately a spiritual problem, to change one's heart from hatred to love, from revenge to forgiveness. And so how do you change that? Now, long after 9/11, a few years after 9/11, 2002, 2003, 2004, I had several opportunities to get involved with the U.S. military, and it was laid out for me on a silver platter to get involved in consulting with the military and the U.S. government. And I had the opportunity to really create a business centered on advising military and training Marines in particular on cultural aspects of Afghanistan so that they can change hearts and minds in Afghanistan. And I realized for me to really get involved in that would have required me that would have had to be the full-time focus, that, okay, I am a consultant for the U.S. military or for the U.S. government, or consultant that is offering my services to these types of entities. And I walked away from that opportunity because in the end, ultimately, I didn't believe in it. I believe in changing hearts and minds, but I didn't believe in the context. I didn't really believe that the U.S. military is the way to go about doing this. Now, I will say again that Marines and Special Forces Psych Ops, they have done a great job to whatever extent they were involved. But as a policy, a government cannot change a people group or these types of problems through the military or government policy. So individually, you guys that served in the military, you guys did a great job. Your work is not in vain. Lives have been changed. And believe me, for the rest of our lives, there's going to be stories, many, many stories that will be told of Afghan people whose lives, there will be many, many stories of Afghan people whose lives were positively impacted by the presence of the U.S. military and their interactions with members of the U.S. military. And so the positive impact of having the U.S. military on the ground will be seen, and there are stories now, but will be seen in generations to come, the good things. And the good things are not what our political leaders, the decisions they make and their foreign policies and their commands and edicts, but you guys that have been on the ground interacting with Afghan people, you've made a positive impact, believe me. Okay, so let me get directly to the point of the solution for the problem of revenge. And this goes directly to everything I've been saying. The ultimate solution to change a human heart from hatred and revenge to love and forgiveness requires a spiritual transformation. It's not a problem of the culture, ultimately. It's a problem of the human heart. And so my understanding of my belief system is that the answer is Jesus Christ and what he demonstrated in his life, his teachings, his death, and his resurrection. And when Christ was crucified, which if you're not a Christian and you wonder, you don't really believe all this, it is historically verifiable that Christ was crucified, and prior to his death, his prayer was, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And then the soldiers, the Roman soldiers, divided his garments among them by casting lots. And so there is Christ, this historical figure, just from a secular standpoint, if you will. This historical figure named Jesus, crucified, and while he's being crucified and tortured, he prays to God the Father that God will forgive them because his tormentors don't understand what they're doing. And how can that be? How can someone show that type of forgiveness? Well, to get theological, I would say the resurrection is also a verifiable historical event. If you don't believe me on that, just do your own research. If you've never thought about that before, the resurrection of Christ is historically verifiable with real evidence. So check that out if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, or think I'm just crazy, or think Christians are crazy for believing that Jesus rose from the dead. But regardless of that, that story of Christ and his death and his resurrection is a story of love and forgiveness. And this is a story that has changed millions and millions of lives over the past 2,000 years. And to this day, and in my lifetime, there are many, many people from Muslim countries and Muslim backgrounds, including in Afghanistan, and including among the Pashtun people, that have come to faith in Christ. They have turned away from Islam, and they have turned away from what they have been taught about some of the things that I have talked about and that I will be talking about. And their hearts have been transformed, and they have become followers of Jesus Christ. And this ultimately is the solution. And I know many, many, many former Muslims who are now Christians, and their stories are amazing. And if you just search online and just start searching for former Muslims who have become Christians, you'll hear some of their stories and see some of their stories, just some amazing stuff that is going on in the world today that's hidden under the radar screen. And history is going to show that that many, many people from the Pashtun people group have come to faith in Christ. In a future video, I will be talking about the fact that heaven will be an extremely multicultural, multi-ethnic throng of people from every tribe and tongue and nation. And I'll talk about that because I think that's very relevant for some of the issues that we'll talk about related to Islam and Muslim people groups around the world. And I'm going to talk very directly about some of these things in future videos. So this has been a long video, but I do want to, I jotted down a few questions. I do want to ask you some questions if you want to chime in on the comments. What do you think about the concept of honor? Is that a good thing, and is that worth defending honor? I think that is a good quality myself, but when it's linked with revenge, the revenge is kind of the bad side of it. But what do you think? Is honor good, and protecting one's honor and standing up for one's honor, is that a good thing? And is it appropriate? What ways are appropriate to do that or not? Another thing is, I want to ask you guys, is forgiveness. Is forgiveness weakness? People have said that, say that often, that if you show forgiveness, you're showing weakness. Is that true? What do you think? And I know a lot of, that's for other videos, what's swirling around in my head. And then justice. What's the concept of justice? How does that have to do with revenge? What is the difference, comparing and contrasting justice and revenge? Those are just some things to think about. I'll probably address some of these issues, but I've got a lot more content to come. This has been a super long video. I've had to take a couple breaks doing this. Thanks for bearing with me. If you have an interest in this, obviously you're watching to the end. Please join in the commentary and look for more content from me soon.